Hello, and welcome back. For this week's podcast, we're joined once again by Alex Ngari, who's speaking with us about the relationship and sometimes conflict between energy development and migratory birds across Africa. Alex tells us how both sides construct benefits both. If you like this episode and like to follow more on this project, please follow links in the description. And if you'd like to support us, you can make a donation at restoreourplanet.org or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Enjoy the conversation. Hello and welcome back to Restore Our Planet podcast with me, your host, Jack Cole. So today I'm joined once again by Alex Ngari from BirdEyes International, who's based in Nairobi, and he's been telling us a little bit about migratory birds and his flyways program that he's the manager of and energy development across the continent. So Alex, welcome. And you start by telling us a little bit about your background and the work that you've been up to.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jack, for having me again. My name is Alex Ngari. I work for BirdLife International, the Africa office based in Nairobi, Kenya. And one of the activities or one of the mandates of BirdLife International is to conserve migratory birds. They fly with the important site for migratory species in the continent. And the program is important for, of course, all the continents due to the nature of birds. And this is very important program for BirdLife because, again, BirdLife is a partnership organization having partners across the globe. And of course, the migratory birds are widespread, and therefore we take action across various continents in the world. So for Africa, I am the focal point for the flyways and migratory species. Of course, migratory birds are important component of our wildlife or nature, and they are a unique, group of birds because the way they survive is by moving or escaping, bad seasons. You know that in the world we have two extreme seasons, which are normally manifested in a southern or northern hemisphere. We have summer and we have winter. And what birds have adapted to do is they usually escape the very cold seasons, and therefore they have to migrate from very cold seasons or places to the warm areas. And when the warm season returns, that is the summer, they normally move to those regions. So in a way, they make cyclic movements, and they have to travel north-south twice every year. And many birds cover thousands of kilometers. Therefore, migratory birds, the flyways, the migratory corridors, constitute a very unique component of our planet. And therefore, everybody, all the organizations, all the systems need to mind migratory birds whenever they are operating.
More specifically, where are those flyways and which bird species undergo the journeys?
Yeah, very good question, Jack. We have different kind of birds, and these different kind of birds have different strategies to migrate from one point to another. The first group of birds which I would like to talk about is the water birds. The water birds are those birds that depend on water bodies for their survival. So you would imagine that a water bird will move from one water body to another. So their movements and their stopping sites, the sites that they utilize for their survival, are more or less predictable. You will know that a certain water bird will move from one wetland site to another. A good example is the Rift Valley Lake system in Africa, which is a system of lakes. And therefore, water birds in their migratory cycles will move from, for example, Lake Baringo to Lake Natron, then going southwards. And they would use the same route when they're going upwards to northern hemisphere. So that is one group of birds. The other group of birds are called migratory land birds. So migratory land birds have actually do not have very specific routes that they take. They move on a broad front, which means that it is very hard for you to predict where a particular bird will be at a particular point, because they are really not following any resources or very explicit resources like water bodies. They move, anyhow. Nevertheless, within the migratory land birds, we have also different categories. We have those birds which have sort of evolved to identify certain migratory corridors, in which case most of these birds are large-bodied birds, which we call migratory soaring birds, like the vultures, like the white stork, the black stork. And what these birds have done over time, they have been able to identify, earth services that provide excellent environmental conditions for them to be able to move from one point to another in a very easy manner, basically without expending a lot of their energy to flap their wings to move from one point to another. So what migratory birds do, they take advantage of the rising thermals. When the sun is up in the sky, it hits the earth, differently. So you have places that are warmer and there are places that are cooler. And that differential in terms of heating, what happens is that you have rising thermals. So you have like wind going up in the sky. And when this wind is going up in the sky, the migratory soaring birds take advantage of those rising thermals to go high up in the sky without basically spending any energy. So once they are up high in the sky, very high, when the thermals stop lifting them up, so what they just do is to spread their wings and they start gliding. So when they're gliding, they can take hundreds of kilometers to move from one point to another. So they are clever guys. So that is one group of birds, which are calling migratory soaring birds, falling into the category of land birds. So the other group of land birds are the passerines. They are small guys, and these guys are tough also, because part of their migratory strategy means that they eat a lot. Just before they migrate, they eat a lot because they are not able to use the rising thermals. They have to actively flap their wings to move from one point to another. So they need that energy. And when the birds are migrating, the chances of eating, the chances of feeding, it is a tough exercise. So they have to be prepared for that. So they stock up their bodies, they feed a lot, they stock up their bodies with fat, and this is the fat that they use to generate energy when they are migrating. So very good guys also. So in the category of migratory land birds, the passerines, you get species like the barn swallow, the swallows, the swifts, the turtle dove, quite several species.
So smaller birds in that category.
Yeah, small birds, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now moving on to threats. I imagine that all three types there face a variety of different threats on their journeys. Some, of course, being quite natural, predatory, but others perhaps more recent with the influence of human development and growth and urbanization and things. So, what
Yes.
are specifically some of those threats that these species face on their journeys?
Great. So before I go to that question, Jack, I would like to express or speak about how important Africa is with regard to migratory birds. So you see how Africa is positioned when you look at the planet. So you have an extensive continent which moves from north south, and you have a massive continent above it. So you're talking about Eurasia, Europe and Asia, a massive continent close to the North Pole, which means this continent, this Eurasia, experiences cold and summer, both extremes, at different times of the year. And you have this continent which is very close to it, which actually adjoins it, Africa, and it moves all the way from north to south. So basically, what happens is that when it is winter time in Eurasia, the birds find it, very easy. They have a resource, which is Africa, to use to escape the bad season in Northern Hemisphere. So what we normally say is that Africa is at the center of African Eurasian flyway region. So Africa basically makes the migration happen. So we experience a lot of billions of birds in Africa when it is winter in the north. And so we host a lot of birds. And Africa, of course, has good and variety of habitats. And actually, a lot of birds, or most birds, spend even 75% of their time, of their lifetime in Africa. So really, it's a continent for which birds don't want to move out from. But birds have to do that because in the north, summer provides abundant, excellent productivity conditions, and therefore birds have to move there and take advantage of that and even breed there. So in a nutshell, that is the importance of Africa with respect to migratory species. So going to your question about threats that migratory birds are facing in Africa, there are quite a number. And that is actually why bird life is in existence. Because we are here our mandate is to conserve. Our mandate is to work with other people in partnership with other people, with other organizations, to address the threats facing birds, but also facing migratory species. So one of the major threats that birds are facing in Africa is illegal killing and taking. Over the years, human beings in Africa and in other places, of course, have evolved, systems that are in sync with migratory species. In Africa, we have many hunters, and in Africa, we have people who, take away birds, either illegally or legally. And when we talk about illegal killing and taking of birds, we are talking about millions being taken every single season. In Mediterranean, in the Mediterranean alone, the Mediterranean region, that is North Africa, we have more than 5 million birds being taken away from the world illegally. So the population of birds, or the numbers that are taken away from the world, are of course more than 5 million. So combining illegal killing and legally killed all taken birds. So that's a major threat, and BirdLife has been intervening in various ways, raising resources to combat illegal killing and taking of birds. and some of the activities that we are involved in is public education, public awareness, and a capacity building with especially the law enforcers to ensure that at least the birds do not go away because somebody is breaking the law. So enforcing, or rather, strengthening the law enforcement structures in various countries. That has been happening quite a lot in North Africa, in places like Egypt, in places like Tunisia, in places like Morocco. And in other parts of Africa, it is also happening. We are doing studies, especially on vultures, on parrots, fighting and detecting the illegal activities and reporting those issues to the authorities. So we have a number of projects that are currently ongoing in the region to address the illegal killing and taking of birds. The other aspects, or the other threat, which is really serious, is loss of habitats due to land use and land use change, including the pollution. And when you talk about land use change or land use, there are many factors that are basically anthropogenic in nature that come into play. So we are talking about expanding population in Africa. People need to eat, so they need to farm, and therefore, what is happening is that with increasing population, the need to expand land for agriculture also comes in. So the good habitats, the once good habitats for the migratory species are slowly being taken away for food production. And therefore, BirdLife has detected this as a major issue, and we are coming in to address it in various ways. For example, we are working with various governments to ensure that deforestation is curtailed. We have land use, procedures or land use management tools in place for various ecosystems, and we have identified quite a number of, like 1,200, sites in Africa, which are considered to be important for conservation of birds. And the majority of these, or quite a good number of those sites, are also important for migratory species. So most of our actions as BirdLife are focusing on these 1,200 sites and the corridors, or the flyways that connect them. So we have quite a good number in across the continent, and we have identified those sites that are important for migratory species for targeted action. The other problem, and which is actually the topic of our discussion today, is infrastructure, and specifically the energy infrastructure. And energy infrastructure is actually an emerging and very important threat to migratory birds, especially big-bodied birds. The big-bodied birds are those birds that are not able to quickly maneuver away or around from dangerous energy infrastructure. And when you talk about energy infrastructure, you are talking about, wind turbines. We are talking about energy evacuation or power evacuation infrastructure, like the pylons, like the cables or the power lines. And you wouldn't believe the number of birds that are being killed as we speak by energy infrastructure, especially the power lines. So what happens with power lines? I mean, we all know that Africa is a power deficit continent. Around 500 million people in Africa have no access to power. So what is happening? So governments, investors, financial institutions are coming on the same table and saying, we have a problem here, which is energy poverty in Africa, and we can do something about it. So you'll see a lot of emergence of power generation, power transmission, and power production, power distribution projects across the continent. Every government wants to. I mean, there's no way you can develop without power. So every government is putting energy production, energy sufficiency into their development agenda as a priority sector. So, for example, if you look at the Rift Valley, you have quite a good number of geothermal projects that are being initiated or that have been recently been initiated by various governments. You are talking about climate change. So climate change, the fossil fuels, therefore governments and investors are talking about renewable energy. And renewable energy in our context is basically solar. You are looking at geothermal, you are looking at hydro dams, hydroelectric dams, and also you're looking at wind farms. So the major problem comes in when this energy infrastructure is badly deployed. You can have a very good wind farm with very good intentions, but the moment you place the wind farms in a migratory corridor, you jeopardize hundreds, thousands of migratory species that use that corridor. Again, if you deploy your power lines in a way that is not friendly to birds, you end up killing many of them, killing through electrocution and killing through collisions. So energy infrastructure is occupying, as we speak, a very important section in the threat categories that we are addressing in Africa. And finally, the compounding factor is climate change. Africa is being impacted by climate change. So when there is illegal killing, when there is loss of habitat, expanding settlements, and infrastructure, and you add the climate change into the question, then we have, not a very good position with regard to migratory species. And with regard to, for example, energy infrastructure, BirdLife has taken this issue very seriously, and we have developed projects that donors are happy about. They understand our problem, and we've been able to even approach donors like GEF and the UNDP to help us mainstream, migratory birds conservation considerations into various sectors, including energy. The GEF funded project is a very successful project, which is operating along the Red Sea and the Rift Valley Migratory Corridor. And within this project, we are engaging various stakeholders, especially in the energy sector, to ensure that the designs of the pylons that are transmitting power, the way the power lines are deployed, the way they are configured on the pylons, actually takes care or are informed by the conservation of migratory birds. We have engaged various governments in Ethiopia, in Djibouti, in Egypt, to ensure that the wind farms that are built actually considers, in terms of placement, in terms of siting, they consider the migratory birds question, because collisions, can have a very, detrimental effect on migratory birds at a population level. Same case applies to power lines. Majority of birds that die from energy infrastructure die through electrocution and collisions with power lines. And what BirdLife has been doing is very easy and very targeted. We have made collaborations. We have made collaborations with many stakeholders. We have taken the lead in terms of capacity building to ensure that mainstreaming happens. As an infrastructure expands, it expands in a way that is friendly to birds and in a way that is sustainable.
Fantastic. What are the direct or indirect negative effects that the disruption to migratory birds have on human societies?
Yes, I will. Good question. That I will still focus on energy because that is a topic of a discussion today. What usually happens is that whenever there is an interaction between a bird and a power line, for example, is that there is usually a power interruption. There is power outage. And when there is power outage, you can imagine the amount of losses that the company that is distributing power, suffers, and also the businesses that are supported by the impacted power line. So you can imagine if you have 50 birds interacting with power lines, you can imagine of 50 interruptions, which means the company is not able to sell power to the people. It also means then that the company spends more of its maintenance resources to go and fix lines that have been disrupted by birds. And when you cascade the impact to the customers, then you find those are big losses. In fact, a study has been conducted in South Africa, and it has been estimated that 65 million US dollars are lost annually because of birds and power infrastructure interactions alone. That is a huge amount. So these are some of the negative interactions. Of course, on the positive side, I mean, there are many benefits that birds bring to human beings. Migratory birds are unique. They are sweet to see, and they are our visitors. You can imagine someone from South Africa watching a bird flying all the way from Finland. I mean, it's amazing. It's something to marvel about. How did they know that? It's fantastic. And at the same time, there's someone from Finland saying, "Oh, this guy is coming all the way from South Africa. Fantastic. These are the guys that we need to be with. They are our ambassadors. We love them." So, I mean, they are extraordinary group of a part of our nature, which we need to keep.
So, looking into the future now, say perhaps 5 or 10 years, as the energy sector continues to grow across Africa, how are organizations like BirdLife and the collaborations you've mentioned, how are those looking to grow and expand and improve over the coming years?
Yeah, great question, Jack. The position that BirdLife has taken is that we cannot do it alone. We have to collaborate with others to make it happen. We have to collaborate with every willing individual to ensure that migratory birds are conserved, because of one very simple reason. If you are so good at conserving migratory species in one of African countries like Tanzania, you're very good at that. And this bird migrates all the way to Egypt. And Egypt is not in a good position to take care of the birds. What happens is that all the effort spent in Tanzania lose value because we are likely to lose the bird. So what bird life is happening? What we are doing as bird life, we are forming these collaborations. And we are forming collaborations at different levels of intervention. We are forming collaborations with the financial institutions, the banks that are lending governments money, and the banks that are lending private sector money to develop the the energy sector. The power grid managers, those organizations or those institutions at national level that manage the grid, the ones that are in a position to say, we are going to change the design of the pylon and the way we deploy power lines so that our power lines and our grid network is nature friendly. We are also collaborating with the wildlife management authorities. For example, in Ethiopia, we are collaborating with the national, with Ethiopian Wildlife Conservation Agency through our partners in Ethiopia called Ethiopian Natural History Society Ethiopian Wildlife and Natural History Society. Yeah, that's the correct name. We have facilitated an MOU among us, three key national agencies, conservation agency, and the two power utilities in Ethiopia, to form to come up with an MOU, which is basically says we are going to work together for the betterment of our energy sector, for the benefit of people and energy sector in Ethiopia. And it is working, because what has happened is that we have identified the black spots where migratory birds are being killed by energy infrastructure. And therefore, we are in the process of acquiring the retrofitting material, the kinds of gadgets that will help us to turn the tide around the killer power lines such that they become safe for migratory birds. So that is working very well. The other part of collaboration that we are looking into, and we are very, very much active in terms of progressing, is the policy making area. And a lot of effort from BirdLife has got into collaborating with the Convention on Migratory Species, or what you like to call CMS. And within CMS, there is an explicit energy agenda, and BirdLife is quite active in that agenda. And BirdLife, as we speak, is coordinating what we are calling Energy Task Force. Energy Task Force is supposed to catalyze governments and other stakeholders to take action to make energy sector friendly to birds and other wildlife. And of course, there are other development organizations like Power Africa. Power Africa is a mechanism by government of USA to ensure that Africa is powered, or Africa is energized. So we are here, and we are telling everybody here, we are here. We are happy to collaborate with you, and we have what we are calling a toolkit to engage in the sector, in a toolkit which ensures that BirdLife intervenes at the planning stage of power or energy projects and the programs. We have tools that ensure we intervene at the production stage of power generation, and tools that ensure that we engage at power transmission, and tools that ensure that we engage at distribution. So whenever we are engaging the stakeholders, we are not in short of tools to facilitate sustainability in the power sector. And of course, we have, capacity building materials for the stakeholders, and these tools are available for use by various stakeholders. For example, when you talk about planning, we are looking at sensitivity mapping tools, which are pioneering tools in Africa. I don't remember. Anyone apart from BirdLife who has been able to develop a sensitivity mapping tool which covers an extensive area like North Africa and Northeast Africa. So this tool is there, and it is an open source tool. Stakeholders can go there and use the tool to map the sensitivity of areas that they want to develop their programs or deploy their projects. So that is one. On production, the sensitivity mapping tool helps in proper siting. And under production, we have also developed tools for mitigation, especially when you look at potential collision between wind turbines and birds. For example, in Egypt, we have been able to develop and deploy a shutdown on demand criteria, which the stakeholders are using in Egypt. And it has been really taken up very well to ensure that whenever birds are at risk of being hit by wind turbines, there is a process to shut down those, those turbines, and the risk is removed. But beyond that, there is a lot to do that is happening to enhance the collaborations and understanding between stakeholders at the national level. You remember that, that when you are doing power project or power programs, there are many stakeholders that we have to link up to. The environmental authorities, the investor, the regulator, the financial institution. So what BirdLife has been able to do, especially through the GEF UNDP project, is to bring these stakeholders together and say, there is a problem. We all need power. We all need electric power, but we do not have to produce, energize our countries and disadvantage nature. There is a way we can do our power production with at the same time conserving our birds. And we are very happy to say that we've been successful in many respects because these stakeholders have been able to listen to us. It is not easy, and we hope to spread these successes across Africa.
Good, fantastic, Alex. Good to hear the great, exciting what you're doing. And finally, so you've just celebrated World Migratory Bird Day this month. What is your parting shot, so to speak?
Yeah, Reed. The World Migratory Bird Day is a day which calls all of us to actually reflect on the migratory species. How would the world be without the migratory species? Remember the white stork, the black stork, the barred ibis. How would the world be? The migratory species are part and parcel of our lives. It's part of a bigger ecosystem. But the trick is that these are birds that come and go. So the risk is that, these are birds that will come and go after all. But the reality is that the migratory species are a shared heritage. They belong to all of us. They belong to Kenya. They belong to Tanzania. They belong to Egypt. They belong to Morocco. They belong to Italy. It is a shared resource. And therefore, the World Migratory Bird Day calls upon us to reflect and how we can enjoy, how we can live with the migratory birds, harmoniously. It is a shared heritage. It is for everyone to enjoy and cherish migratory birds. And my call would be, or my call would be, I mean, let's do what we can in our little ways to think about and take action to conserve migratory species, whether at the organization level or at individual level. Let's enjoy them, let's cherish them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex.